Thank you.
Okay.
Super terrific. Thank you, Colton.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
we're gonna apologize for not starting the Zoom when we thought we started the Zoom. There was some issues with our technical difficulties.
fix.
So, oh well, I screwed up. Anyways, we'll move right along. So going back to the business privilege tax. We heard from Nick, if he would just go ahead and do a condensed version of what you already said.
Absolutely. So I handed out a packet that talks about business privilege tax, a memo originally from January, which outlines how the tax works, who the tax is levied against, what the rates of the tax are, who's exempt from the tax. And that really hasn't changed from January. So that's a good overview of how the tax works for those who want to see. But I've also included with that list of FAQs, which are just like big picture to help understand the tax. And then maybe more importantly, a financial picture of what the tax has collected since 2018. And that's broken down from each year from 2018 through today. And it's also broken down by district because Keystone Central is not the only district that levies a business privilege tax. As you see from the list, there's a handful of other municipalities in the district who levy the tax. And the collections have increased since enforcement has started. Before, the tax was kind of overlooked by the tax office. I don't want to say overlooked, but it wasn't focused on like earned income tax was. Rules and regulations were updated to make it easier for people to get in compliance. Things were put online to make it easier for compliance. Some discovery efforts were made by the tax office to find businesses who were not found before. And that has increased. As we saw in 2018, total collections were just over $1 million. Year to date in 2023, we're almost at 2.2 million, and we still have a few months left. So that has changed. But I did also mention that some of the anomalies in there are simply because when taxpayers would be delinquent for 5 years and they would pay 5 years all at once, sometimes that can cause a big change in one district at one time. And then we talked a little bit about civil versus criminal collections. There's a resolution that was tabled that could be voted on again in the next meeting to allow the tax office for business privilege tax to enforce delinquencies through criminal proceedings. And what that means is not solely through criminal proceedings, but it would be allow the tax office to have the discretion to pick whether in that circumstance for that taxpayer, a civil proceeding or a criminal proceeding would make the most sense. It's already what's authorized by law for earned income tax and one of the procedures we use for earned income tax. And it's actually what the school district used completely. They didn't do any civil, only criminal for business privilege tax prior to 2019. Then as
I'm sorry, Nick. So we did criminal before 2019?
Correct. So the only enforcement method previously was criminal. After the tax office started to update the tax, update the resolution, update the rules and regulations, the language was changed to only allow civil.
Did the board approve that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I wasn't here
You were
then.
on the board then.
Okay,
Elizabeth, did we talk more?
oh, sorry. May I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go
Thank
ahead.
you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I don't, now granted, a lot of us, some of us weren't here.
Mhm.
When that criminal process was in place in 2019 or earlier, do we have any, without digging too deep, do we have any record or does anyone have any memory or anything on whether or not, for some reason they got rid of it? Okay, what was the benefit back then? I mean, I'm just trying to
Sure.
figure out, this is news to me. I did not know we went from yes, criminal, no criminal. Now they're kind of leaning criminal again.
No, actually,
Yeah,
we're leaning both. We're gonna do
Yeah,
both.
our preference is to have both. Personally, my opinion is that it was sort of overlooked to not give us both options like we have for EIT, like the state has for their tax enforcement. But I think the reason why it was changed, I don't think there was anything good or bad at the time. I think the attorney who drafted the new rules and regulations for the district that the board voted on was just more familiar with the civil collection side of it. My personal opinion is allow us both when it makes more sense and it's more efficient or more costly to use one or the other, have both options available to us, which is how other tax works. I can't say, as you see from the numbers, the tax enforcement was not quite as strong previously. So if there were certainly businesses that the school district had in court for unpaid taxes, Whether that was for business privilege or earned income, it's hard to tell. But whether it was either at that point in time, it would have been a criminal proceeding.
Okay, so it would be nice if we, I mean, I know things change, but it would be nice if we knew someone from 2017 or 2018 and found out, you know, there must have been some benefit or not a benefit for them to change it back then. And I don't want to dig
I
too
don't-
deep
I
on
don't
this, but
recall Any reason,
I don't
truthfully,
need,
I don't recall, I was on the board then, I don't recall why we did it, I don't recall how it happened.
okay,
It was just probably one of those things that when it was rewritten, it was done.
Yeah, I can tell you why it started criminal and why it changed. I can't tell you how the enforcement worked prior to that, if there were good or bad examples, but
okay,
the reason why it was first criminal is just simply that's what Act 32 and Act 511, the state laws that were passed
Right, okay.
authorize that. So the rules and regulations here just sort of mimic the state to say, this is how you can enforce it, took that. When it was changed, it was our special tax counsel, which we still have, that rewrote the rules and regulations. In the other districts that she worked in, she was most familiar with the civil proceeding. Why that was the most familiar to her, I'm not sure. A lot of times it's just, sometimes you have a bad magistrate and you don't want to go through the criminal process. Other times she works with some places outside of the Philadelphia area, which a lot of times they go right to the court of common pleas because the tax balances are well over $12,000. So that's why it was changed. I don't think it was because we had a good or bad history with it. I think it was just what she was most familiar with. And she's actually the one who drafted, along with David Lindsay, the new resolution to allow for both. But David Lindsay would probably have some history as well if anything happened, good or bad prior to 2019, because he most likely would have been involved in those collection efforts.
well,
I
thank
just think
you.
it's another part, another tool in our tool belt, if you would. I mean, just like you're not just gonna have a hammer, you're gonna have a wrench also. So we want to have both sides of it, so that whatever we feel or Nick feels best at the time, he can pursue the civil or criminal.
I think it all depends on the scenario that you're dealing with. I mean, whichever one's going to be most logical to use. I mean, it just gives them more flexibility. That's all.
Yeah, and I guess I can give you a hypothetical on when it would make the most sense, and I'll make fun of Noelle here. If Noelle opens an accounting firm, Noelle's accounting, she doesn't register with us, she ignores us. Our first step would be to send her a welcome letter, welcome to the district, here are your responsibilities as a taxpayer, as a business in the district. If she ignores that, we would send a second letter to follow up. If she ignores that, we would try other methods to get a hold of her, but if we can't, eventually we would schedule an audit. By law, they're responsible to respond to an audit and to allow us to examine their books to determine what tax liabilities are owed. If they don't respond to the audit, then you can have a fine up to $500 as allowed by state law and allowed by the school district's resolution. So we would schedule the audit. We would schedule a date and time for the audit. We have to allow an extension to that, and we have to be amenable to their time needs. But if they ignore that audit, they don't show up for the audit, then we would be able to file a complaint for failure to appear for audit. If we go the civil route, we have to pay to file that complaint. We would likely seek the highest amount of fees just because of the cost and time associated with it. If we had a good relationship with the magistrate and we could go the criminal route, we could go to the magistrate, say, hey, there's not even a dollar amount of tax due yet. This is just to get them to comply. We would file a complaint for failure to appear for audit. We would suggest to the magistrate a fine, which would likely be, if it's their first offense, it might be $0. If there's no amount due with it, we might ask for $50 or something just to help with some of those costs. But that's a case where the criminal procedure would most likely be faster and less costly for both parties in a circumstance like that. Now, if we're talking about a large tax balance due, those would most likely, and I know you guys have to be the oversight of this, so it's hard for me to say, you need to trust me in some of these instances, and you have every right to take it away eventually if it's being abused. But in those cases, we would not go the criminal route. The state does in certain instances. There's been public filings here for $40,000, $50,000 as tax owed that they went the criminal route through the local magistrate. But in most of those cases, we would probably file with the court of common pleas and then file for a lien against that business.
Any other questions?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Okay. This part I don't understand. If Keystone Central School District Board at some point decides to rescind and not collect this tax anymore for the district, if. Does that mean that a business that is in Bald Eagle Township currently, they get the tax money because the school, it's under the umbrella of the school district, okay? But would Bald Eagle Township still get tax money if the business is in Mill Hall? What I'm trying to say is, if the district is no longer involved with this, is it just too simple to say all the taxes then collected would just be equally divided between these other municipalities? Or does it matter what business is in that municipality and how much they would get?
It matters on the municipality. So the Local Tax Reform Act has certain caps that you can levy for business privilege mercantile tax. So for example, our rate right now in the district is, it's
1 mil?
1.5. So it's
$1.50.
$1.50 on every $1,000 of receipts, $1.50 in tax. Right now, Keystone Central levies that full rate of 1.5, which means that if Bald Eagle Township also levies 1.5, because of the cap, we can't charge the business 3 mils and split it 1.5, 1.5. We can only charge 1.5. And since they levy it, we split it at that point. But all of those ordinances that levy the tax in those other 11 municipalities are different. For example, Dunstable, you see how low theirs is?
Yeah, I was
They
wondering about
only
that.
level mercantile tax. And this is kind of nuanced, but the business privilege and mercantile tax are actually two different taxes.
Mhm.
Mercantile is only on retail sales. So no service business in Dunstable Township pays business privilege tax to Dunstable. It all comes to Keystone Central. So in that circumstance, if Keystone Central got rid of the tax, businesses in Dunstable, if they're selling retail sales, would still have to pay the tax. If they're a service business, they would no longer have to pay the tax because all that revenue comes to the district.
Okay, so then the business in Dunstable, well, let me pick Bald Eagle again. So because Dunstable has that little nuance. So Keystone Central School District doesn't collect the tax anymore. The businesses in Bald Eagle Township, would Mill Hall see any tax money from a business that's in Bald Eagle Township? Or would they only see tax money from a business that's in their own municipality?
For how the business privilege tax works, the tax money only goes to where you operate. So Bald Eagle would never see tax money for a business in Mill Hall. Right now, these collections, what comes into Keystone Central is for a business anywhere in Keystone Central School District. But the money that goes to Beech Creek or Bald Eagle or Mill Hall are only businesses that operate in their area. It's not that we collect for every business in Keystone Central and then we split it out. It's if you're in Mill Hall, we collect for Mill Hall, keep the school district's portion, pay Mill Hall their portion. So Bald Eagle would never see money from a business from Mill Hall because they can only levy taxes on their own residents.
Okay, so what portion do we keep then from the gross receipts?
Well, so the tax rate is 1.5, and we split that with all of these municipalities, with the exception of the places that only levy the mercantile tax. We keep the full service businesses and we split the retail. Now, if I don't have all of their ordinances in front of me.
No, I'm not asking.
If they all levied a 1.5 mil tax rate, then none of the taxes on the businesses in those districts would change, even if Keystone Central got rid of theirs. I'm almost certain Bald Eagle Township levies that full 1.5 mil. Keystone Central also levies that full 1.5 mil. We can't charge 3 mils because that's above the cap. So right now, only 1.5 is charged. Half of it goes to Bald Eagle, half of it goes to Keystone Central.
Got it.
If Keystone Central got rid of theirs, the tax rate's still 1.5, but it all goes to Bald Eagle. So those businesses would see no change in the tax. It would just be that Bald Eagle gets all of it, Keystone would get none. Same thing if Bald Eagle drops theirs today, Keystone Central would still get 1.5. Bald Eagle would just get none at that point.
Okay.
But if there's a township, so say Green Township, I think they're actually only a mercantile as well. If Mill Hall only levied a 1 mil in their ordinance, right now they're still charged a 1.5 mil because we charge a 1.5 mil, we split that evenly. If Keystone Central dropped theirs and their ordinance only levied a 1 mil tax, then their rate would go from 1.5 mils down to 1 mil.
Okay. Understood.
Nick, I have a question. If we'll use Bald Eagle Township again for an example.
Mhm.
So if someone does not pay this tax, business privilege tax, and now we want to take them to civil. Can Bald Eagle Township do the same thing? If they're not paying us, then Bald Eagle's not getting their share. Can they go civil route or criminal route also?
They do have every right. I would have to check the law. We're technically the tax officer for their collection. They've
Okay.
appointed us to collect this tax for them. I think that they still have the right to go after delinquent taxpayers, even with us named as the tax officer, but I'm not positive on that. Technically, if their ordinance says that we could go criminal collection, we could file, the tax office could file a criminal complaint and reference their tax
tax
code,
office.
not Keystone Central's, but we want to be more transparent than that.
And
We don't
also-
want, we don't want to go around Keystone Central and just use their ordinance, even though that would be allowed.
Right.
We would prefer it to be clear in our
So
ordinance
if
what
for
we
some,
allow.
some reason we decided to do away with the business privilege tax, it was still continued in Bald Eagle Township, they could go after them the same way we could civil or criminal.
And,
So
and
there really is
actually,
no-
as-
the only benefit is us getting money and them getting money, or them getting all the money.
in that circumstance, yes. Now, if they're in one of these, not one of these 11 townships, then those businesses would no longer be subject to the tax, but it would actually look the same to the business, because unless we would reject the appointment to be their tax officer, or they would stop appointing us, we would still collect it. We would still levy it at the same rate. It'd just be that the check that we would cut would be 100% to Bald Eagle, not 50% to Keystone Central, 50% to Bald Eagle.
Does that answer everything for you?
Pretty much.
I think the public isn't aware of that either. I
But,
think they
yeah.
think Keystone Central levies this tax on everybody and we're responsible for it. And if we choose to, remove it, then they won't have to pay it anymore. I just think the public is, they just don't understand
No,
the dynamics of the.
No,
the
you're
picture.
absolutely right. I mean,
Yeah.
you've tried to put out as much education and information, but if they choose not to ask a question or they're talking to another uninformed person, it just perpetuates.
And we
Um,
keep putting out press releases and we keep telling them, putting out all the information, that they choose not to read the information we put forward,
Mhm.
then the responsibility is on them, not on us.
We've had a couple businesses come in and Nick has sat down
Yeah.
with them. Some, pretty vocal taxpayers out there, and, they were very vocal back as to why they believe that it is unfair. But again, they were under the impression, well, if KCSD gets rid of this, I wouldn't have to pay it. But,
It's not always the case.
Yes, it's not always
I
the
think
case.
the biggest
Correct.
complaint I hear is on the gross receipts versus net receipts, but
And
Right.
the reason why the legislature set it up that way, in all fairness, is it's so much easier. I mean, think about if you have a business and you file your state or federal taxes, the filing's this big. Our filing's one page, which anybody can do even without an accountant, because in 99% of the circumstances, it's line 1 of your 1120 or line 1 of your Schedule C or line 1 of your Schedule E times 0.0015. And that's also why the rate is required to be so low. It's 100 times lower than the corporate income tax rate, because the corporate income tax is on profits, since this is on gross
Gross.
receipts. I mean, if you're a business that does $1 million of sales, the tax is $1,500, which 1,500 sounds a lot, but when you think of like real estate, 1,500 is not a very huge property, but a
Right.
business doing $1 million usually has a pretty decent presence within that district.
okay. No other questions?
I'm sorry, I have one last question.
You said you didn't have it.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, don't mess with
I'm
me.
sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I had this one, I don't think there's an answer to, but I'm trying to stay objective. Okay, trying. Something our district has been trying for years to do, and we're getting better at it because of all the things that administration, press releases, we're getting better, but we are still not beloved by the public. Okay, I feel I can say that. So, I had two very interesting conversations. One is not a business owner and one is a business owner in Keystone. The non-business owner said to me, no, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not a business owner in here. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that I'm not a business owner here. This individual feels very strongly that this tax causes a bigger rift between some businesses and Keystone Central School District. Now, what she means by some That's her opinion, okay? So and then I asked a business owner just after I had that conversation, and it's a lot of animosity. So that brings me to this question. I'm hopefully the board, maybe during the work session, would like to discuss it or not. Is the animosity level high enough that this tax is actually not worth it to the perception of the business community towards us? Also, if the business feels animosity or unjust treatment because of this tax, is that impacting our ability to get sponsors, to get grant money, to get them to support our other activities? Or is this not really a big problem as far as perception goes and how we are loved or not loved? So my next question is, I would be really interested if the board would consider inviting professional opinions from, I don't know, maybe the Clinton County Economic Partnership. Maybe they could get the top 3 businesses in this area to come and voice their opinion on this tax or something. Because I'll be honest with you, right now, after learning so much and hearing that this really isn't building what we're trying to do in our strategic plan, right now, I don't know if $1 million is really worth that in the long run. So right now, I cannot support this tax at all. So,
That's not what's on the agenda. The agenda is.
well, I'm just saying, that's
basically-
how far, so right now, I can't, I definitely won't, the criminal aspect of it, I understand the logic. But right now, I'm still, so that's how far, so what I'm trying to say is, I would like the board to consider, or the finance committee, or wherever it's appropriate, to seriously talk about whether or not we should keep this tax.
But the only part I'm gonna interject, if we don't collect this $1.53410 million, whether it's $1.5 million from the business privilege tax.
Right.
We have to collect it somewhere. That's more money than we can actually raise by the index, according to what last year's was, in a year. So we'd have to get a referendum. So who do you think would ever vote to do that? So basically, you want the people of the county to vote to raise their own taxes and their property. Well, we hear all the time, we have old ladies that can't pay their property taxes, they're losing their homes. Now you're gonna take the business that are making, $1 million, $2 million, $6 million, take it away from them and put it back in that poor homeowner getting the social security check every month.
No, I totally
The
see
money has
that
to come
point.
somewhere. We need the
Now,
money
if
to
this was
survive.
$10 million, okay, but it's 1 million, and I feel confident that with our administration, our resources, that I don't feel that that would be the thing that would hold us back. So I'm just saying, I would like to hear what other board members have to say about this. But thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your information has been so well presented, easy to understand. Thank you.
And if you don't mind me responding, just because I
Go
can,
ahead,
I have the fortunate ability to take an objective view about this. I don't get
Thank
paid more or less whether we have the tax. In fact, it's less work for me if we don't have it. So I will caution you on both sides of it. Certainly, you're right. It's an unpopular tax. I'm not sure any tax is popular. In
Yeah.
fact, none of them are. But when you invite people, make sure it's not just business owners, because certainly if a business is going to have a $10,000 less tax bill, they're going to be biased one way or
Well,
another.
who do you
but-
recommend? I mean, not a
No,
particular
I think,
person.
I
but-
think definitely some businesses, but
I
also
know
you
a couple
want
ladies
some homeowners.
that I take care of that are on social security. They get around $600 a month that don't like to pay their property taxes, they still do. Invite those also.
You might want somebody like from
Yeah.
Bald Eagle Township because, it's very different in Bald Eagle compared to Dunstable, for example. There are some differences there, but the real estate is certainly the biggest concern. I can tell you when a business has to write a check for business privilege tax, they're not always happy with it. I personally feel it's a smaller group that's louder than the majority. I mean, we have thousands of businesses in our area, but you guys all know if you had to raise taxes 3/4 $1 or $1 million, you would have a lot more people unhappy than the number of
Right.
businesses unhappy. So there is certainly a balancing act there. But those are good conversations to have, and it's conversations that other districts have had. So there's certainly arguments on both sides of this, and it's sometimes good to flesh out those arguments, but we want to be sure it's not in a way that's detrimental. And we want to remember that sometimes, like if you just invited the largest businesses, one of the issues with that is, and this is public information, if you just go on and look at the largest businesses in
Right.
Clinton County, the Department of State or Department of Health, one of them has listings, it's going to be like First Quality, which I can't tell you whether or not they pay, but most people would consider probably that manufacturing. You would look at government entities, school districts, which they don't have to pay the tax either. But then there's also some businesses. I mean, if you think of Bald Eagle, you're certainly, I mean, it's all public information. What businesses you see on each side of you there, they're not coming to the meeting, you know, a huge box store that's based out of Kansas or North Dakota,
Sure.
but their average sales, and again, this is public information, for some of those large box stores are 50, 60, 70 million dollars a year, which is 70, 80, 90, $100,000 of business tax, which if that huge retailer doesn't have to pay $100,000, well, the only place that you can make that up, because there's only two other taxes you can collect from, is earned income tax or real estate tax, which are both only residents, not businesses in the community.
Okay.
So again, not trying to bias it one way or another, just trying to objectively say, you know, certainly unpopular tax, certainly businesses in the area who may have animosity, may not support your teams, but then there's also a, you know, replacement of revenue side to it, which is why most districts are cautious to do this, because they can't then turn around and say, hey, we messed up, can we have it back?
No, that was really well put. You did it. I think it's.
Jeff,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I was just sitting here thinking that every year when Joni, Dr. Martin bring us the little chart showing us our out years and our budget and how scary that always looks with being $7-8 million in the red. And if we would just say no more business privilege tax, well, there's $1.5 million that we're going to have to make up. And yeah, like Nick just said, there's not too many other places we can go for it. And I'm sure unless we get some fabulous windfall through this restructuring and that the state's supposed to be doing,
Oh, think about that.
you know, which may or may not happen. I'm not holding my breath, but even if they do come across with more money, I mean, it's certainly not going to make up for $1.5 million. And it may be unpopular, but Butch is right. Which is going to be more unpopular with a greater number of constituents out there.
And there's no guarantee if we would get rid of it, that the taxpayer
Taxes.
would not have.
They're
to
gonna
pay.
still have to pay it to the
Sure.
Depending
municipality
upon,
anyway.
you know, they-
But
they might not
that's,
be.
you're absolutely right, but the attention will be on the municipalities, and maybe the municipalities then wouldn't have to raise taxes for, I mean, there's so
They're gonna
many,
get the same money, yeah, so it's.
you
not
know,
affected.
so,
Listen, I don't like paying it. I grade a check out every year. for
so how much do you
$12
pay per
freaking
year?
I don't
remember
like paying it.
It was like $11 or something.
$12, I write a check out. Can I get a
Nobody likes to-
$1,000 stipend? You could be doing it for Renova Borough. Yeah. So,
Okay, well, listen, I'm sorry.
No,
You've
that's
been
okay. I'm not
wonderful.
saying if anybody
Yeah.
does or doesn't.
yeah. All right. Let's moving right along. I think we need to get Audrey going. Keep sitting here listening to us
Yeah.
talk for hours.
She's been sitting here for
Pretty
the last-
interesting. Pretty interesting, isn't it?
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you very much.
And absolutely, and on the,
It's always a
the
pleasure.
back of the memo has all my contact information.
Yes.
Please, if you want to learn more about the tax, I'm happy to sit down, have you come into the office. We can walk through procedures. We can talk about the
Here.
law if you want
I-
that, you know, boring part of it.
Okay.
Thank you. You save this for, I have my own copies. Thank you. Yep. Appreciate it.
Save the tree.
I'm gonna go ahead and pass out my papers. You seem like I'm up next. right?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Now, more people left. I'm like, girl, I'm talking and he's talking. Where do you want me? I know it might.
How about the table right there with the microphone? would be
Sit
the
right
best place.
there and
Okay. We'll take this spot. This feels like a hot seat.
make sure you pull the mic over there so that
Rob, did you get a copy?
I did hand him one, so. So, yeah, I know you're all tired and I won't take too much time, but I do want to
go over some numbers and I gave it to you in paper because I'm old and paper doesn't fail me. So that's the start for this. If you'll want to turn right to page 2, this is kind of where we are today, before any upcoming projects, before anything else. What does your debt look like today? So I wanted to refresh everybody's memory. So on page 2, each row on that table is a school year. And I'll cover what each column is, but let's look at the first column, Series A of 2020. Now, some of you remember, and some of you probably blocked out me being here before, but the Series A and Series AA of 2020 were both for projects. They were done simultaneously. So the first piece, the Series A, was the funding of the ESCO project, the energy conservation. That financing, because it was an energy conservation project, has different rules than a regular construction project. That's why we did 2 different pieces at the same time. Had to keep those funds separate, different rules. The key when you look at this page is the energy project is only allowed to have a term of 20 years. So that final payment in 2040 was 20 years, obviously, from 2020 when we started it, because that's the rule. Some of you remember that. So the other piece, which we did again at the same time, the second column over Series AA of 20, see with now paid down to about 14 million, that's principal and interest, was for the other construction projects. Those payments were intentionally smaller in the first 20 years while we had the payments on the ESCO project. And then in 2041, got bigger by design after the other one pays off. Make sense? Okay, so the guaranteed energy savings, the next column over, that isn't necessarily what you're saving. And I heard you talk about this earlier in your previous meeting that your number has been over that. Well, McClure does that on purpose. They guarantee you what a number they know you're going to hit,
Yes.
right? Right? So this is the number they guaranteed. We don't build into the budget for the financing any of that extra or any of the deferred maintenance. Some of you will remember there was some big numbers on that deferred maintenance. We don't factor that in with the financing because yes, that helps your budget, but it isn't a guaranteed annual number. So we only use the guaranteed energy savings, the 239. So the column on the right, that's an annual total, principal and interest. There's 2 interest payments and 1 principal payment on each borrowing. The total of 1.5 million for the term through 2043. That column becomes important as we're planning for the next piece. So that's why I wanted to refresh where I got to that number. I didn't make it up.
That's current debt.
That is current debt.
Yep.
This is due nothing.
Yep.
They're all fixed rate.
Super terrific.
Any questions on that? You've seen it before, but I wanted you to see again that column on the right, the 1.5 will come into play later. So the next page, if you are interested, you can read at your leisure, but I wanted to refresh everyone's memory. School districts get a rating. It's similar to your credit score on a mortgage. The higher your rating, the lower risk you are and the lower interest rate you pay.
What are we now?
In 2020, you were A1. So if you look in the categories there, there's a row in between them. Call it a AA and a single A category. So the A1, A2, A3 is the single A category. The majority of Pennsylvania school districts fall in that category.
That's why we're average.
Yeah, there'll be a handful above and a handful below,
Yeah.
but most are in that single A category. I have no reason to think it would change, but they don't ask my opinion.
How often do you think they update that? Is it,
Only when you borrow money,
okay,
there's a cost.
Okay.
There's a cost involved.
so it may be higher, okay, or lower. Thank you.
So the next page, just wanted to give you the interest rate. Now, this is a 25-year rate. It's an index that comes out on Thursdays. It's not the exact rate you're going to pay because it's for a 25-year bond, but it is a national average. The point of the bigger chart, if you look, put your pen there, look where interest rates are today, just across, we are basically back to bond rates where we were pre-COVID. So yes, in the last year, have rates gone up quickly? Yes, they have. And we're right back where we started after the all-time lows during COVID. And as you see, the farther you go back, they continue higher. So you can see in the 1-year snapshot, the movements, they move every day a little bit. Usually not anything dramatic like the major ups and downs we had through COVID. Questions? Okay, the next page is what you're most interested in. Now, before I go through this, I want to clarify, you all have the Act 34 booklet, and there's 2 example payment schedules in there that I provided to Crabtree for inclusion in the book. That's these figures that you're going to see in column 3 and 4. So they're in the booklet. There's other tables in there that I prepared that shows the total project cost, which was 22. I want to give you the exact number. 22,193,000 is the estimated project cost that we have in place from Crabtree. Now, you haven't gone to bid, you haven't made final selections, but these are the numbers that are going to be presented at the Act 34 hearing. It's not saying you're going to do that, but I'm sure that Crabtree has gone through with you the purposes of the Act 34 hearing. It's a Department of Ed requirement, et cetera. It's based on estimates. Doesn't require you to do the project at all. But the numbers I'm going through in the handout today are based on what's in that booklet. Make sense? It may or may not be what you do, but it's what's in the hearing next week. So that's what I wanted to talk about. So if you look back to page 5, column 2, that's that total we talked about. 2 bond issues, less energy savings is column 2. That should do nothing where you are now. So column 3, this is what if you borrowed $9.9 million in the spring of 2024. And again, this is with interest rates available now, and I have no idea where interest rates are going to be in spring of 2024. And column 4 is another 9.9 million in spring of 2025. Now, again, it's based on interest rates available now with your A1 rating. All of those things can change. You might have a bigger project, you might have a smaller project. This also assumes, after borrowing 9.9 million twice, that you're going to take $2,688,000 of district funds to put into this project, whether that's capital reserve money, general fund money, ESSER's money, grant money, wherever that's coming from. You're borrowing 9.9 twice. And in the Act 34 hearing, we're going to talk about 2.6 from district funds. Again, that can come from anywhere, but you'll hear that at the hearing next week. So back to the spreadsheet. What might these payments look like? If you look at column 3, again, I mentioned this is just an assumption that you borrow money in the spring of each year because you're going to need the bulk of the funds for construction over the summer. So we're assuming you're going to borrow the money in the spring. That could change, could be sooner, could be later, whatever might happen. So while you have your existing payments in column 2, and we go down column 3, those payments are smaller, primarily interest and small principal payments until 2044. And then you'll see at the bottom of column 3, those payments jump to $2 million, but you're not going to see a jump in your budget because column 2 goes away. So in aggregate, they're the same. Make sense? We call that a wraparound structure. So we're wrapping the new payments around your existing ones. It's to keep your budget level. Same thing happens in column 4. Keep the payments small until column 3 starts to go down, and then column 4 increases. So if I take your eye over to column 6, that's your annual totals. So if you look at the top, the school year you're in right now, you have 1.581 in your budget. So next year that would jump to 1.8, the following year 2.2, and the last increase would be to 2.5, and then stay at 2.5 annual for the term. Now, there's a couple things at play there. First of all, if you're going to borrow this money, DCED, Department of Community Economic Development, requires you to have level debt in aggregate. So the totals have to be within 5% year over year. We have to. It's also good for budgeting. You don't want to get to 2035 and have this big payment and then it drop back down. That would be silly for budgeting, but we're also required to do it that way. We are permitted to have the payments increase slowly over a couple of years at the beginning, which is what we did here, to level out the budget impact. And it's budget impact. I don't know where it's coming from, if it's a millage increase or from a different line item. That's for the board to figure out, but it's a budget increase for that line item of $300,000 approximately for 3 years. And we are permitted to do that. We are allowed to phase the budget impact 2 years after project completion. So I'm assuming here that we have a year of construction and 2 years to help phase in the impact. It might be that we can spread it out over 4 years. I just don't know that yet till we get a construction timeline. Now, that's a lot. And you've been here for a couple of hours. So I'm going to stop for a second and see what questions you have.
Okay, I'll be dead before this is all paid off, but, which is, I don't see how our district is gonna be able to afford these numbers. So you have that all figured out, right?
No,
Okay, super
No.
terrific.
no, that's not my role here. That's the board's role. What I'm showing you is what it would cost based on the numbers the architect
Sure.
provided. I have no say in your budget, obviously. I don't have a vote on how you put that together. All I can do is tell you what it's going to cost.
Sure, I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not putting an opinion here. I'm just showing you interest rates. When we put the Act 34 booklet together about 2 weeks ago,
Yep.
this was what was available. It could go up, it could go down. They're not going to be exactly this because that would be a miracle to have it in 2025, the exact same interest rates.
Okay, well,
But all I
will you
can
be
do is
able to
give
do
you the
this for
information.
us? When you're done with your presentation, we'll be able to do this for us. You know how much we spend every year. You know what our tax income is.
Mhm.
Are these, in your final analysis, are these numbers gonna put us in a real critical place? Or are these like normal numbers that, all school districts have these kind of debt?
I think that's a question for Joni.
Well, there's two
I'd
different
like to hear-
questions
of
there.
course, But,
As far as your financial condition, I can't really speak to that.
Okay,
That's gonna
that's
be
good.
your own administrative team.
okay,
And what I can speak to is obviously you have Act One limits on increases, which is why we want to spread it out over a couple of years,
Yes.
because you only have so much to work with. The second part of your question, do other schools spend 20, 25 million on renovation projects? Oh, yeah. There's a lot of schools I work with that wish their project was $22 million.
I mean, this total amount of debt
Oh,
for
yeah.
the amount that we spend every year.
I have a lot of schools that would, business managers would give their right arm to have this.
Okay, well, there you go. Good news. Thank you. Good news.
Yes, yes, this is,
All right. I'm
Yes.
breathing
All
now.
you have to do is look at the local news and see what
Right.
Bellefonte's anticipating spending on their building.
Or State
projects.
College.
No, no, I understand, but hearing it from a third person who
Yeah,
has
that you
no
just-
skin in the game
no.
is really comforting to me.
And I think Bellefonte's budget's less than ours, and they're spending a lot more in their renovation. I think the new elementary school they're gonna build, I thought I saw
It's
60
bigger.
million somewhere.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So-
Yes, it's a, yes, it
Yeah.
is. There, that's one example I have, and I'm sure Crabtree has addressed this with you, that bids that we've seen myself, and I'm sure they have too, for schools in the last year, have been a little less predictable, right? Because the contractors building in whatever cushion, whatever extra costs they have, so they've been a little less predictable. So keep in mind, this is Crabtree's estimate, and until you have bids in, you may have some options that you cut or add, or,
Okay.
you never know where they're going to be.
Sure, thank you very much.
What
Yes,
interest rate are you to use here? Just like,
it's a range. I can give it to you, the top and the bottom. So that is a range of 3, and the long end is about 4.5.
okay. okay.
Yeah, and again, that's gonna change.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What else can I answer for you about the mechanics? Again, I don't give opinions on what you should do or shouldn't do,
Mhm.
or how it's gonna
Mhm.
pan out, but the process,
How much are these interest rates tied to the stuff the Fed does? Does that have an impact on it, or?
it does, not directly. So when the Fed raises interest rates, that means CDs and money markets, and the interest that investors can get in other investments goes up. So bonds have to compete with that.
Right.
So if if somebody can get this much money in a CD, well, you're tax free, so you don't have to pay as much because the investor doesn't have to pay income tax, which I should back up and address that. But the interest rates do trend because you're competing with other investments that are directly affected by that rate.
Right.
So if they raise rates, these are going to go up. The interest rate increase that went into place the other day, most recently, the market knew that was coming. It was already built in. It was already built into this because we knew it was coming. To back up a little bit. So as a public school district, the IRS lets you issue tax exempt debt. Well, what does that mean? Why do you care? So it means the investors that buy your bonds do not have to pay income tax.
Did not know that.
So Pennsylvania school district bonds are triple tax exempt for Pennsylvania residents. That means Grandma Sue down the road lives in Pennsylvania. She buys a Pennsylvania bond. She does not pay federal income tax, state or local income tax on that money. So it's tax-free investment. Now that's a benefit for you as a school because you can pay the investor a little bit less interest because you say, you know what? You can invest in that corporate security, but you have to pay income tax. So I'm gonna pay you a little bit less and you're still better off because you don't have to pay income tax. So that's the advantage for you with the tax exempt debt.
Never knew.
See? I'm full
Anything
of great
else?
information.
That's really amazing.
Useless
So that makes
information.
us, well, obviously much more appealing, not us, but the debt much more appealing.
Sure.
So that should really help with you, get the best, the lowest interest rate possible at that particular moment.
We're hoping too that, when we receive the lump sum money, that maybe we can throw it into a money market account and make a little interest off of the.
Do a short-term investment while
Yeah.
we're setting that money sitting there, like we're doing now with our other states.
Sure.
We're gonna invest that money or put that money somewhere where it's gonna bring money into as well.
Still make it liquid,
Yes,
that we can move.
But we're gonna
back
be
and
spending
forth,
it-
but-
And you structure those investments based against the construction schedule.
Yeah.
So,
Of course.
so, and one thing that, again, when you get a little farther down the line, I know it's late in the calendar year. The 9.9 million is a lower interest rate if you borrow less than 10 million in a calendar year. That's why I showed you two borrowings on here because it's the cheapest way for you to do it. There's no reason you can't borrow the whole 20 million at one time if you wanted to. Here's the other thing that I don't want to rush anybody because here it is September. If you wanted to borrow 9.9 million in December of 2023, you can come back in January of 2024 and borrow the other 10. It's a calendar year, not a school year. So just keep that in mind because it's the IRS.
Why
They
do you
run on a
have, what,
calendar
3
year.
years you're mandated to spend it by, or?
Yes, yep,
Right.
that's the next page. You looked ahead, didn't you?
No, I remember that.
Yeah.
You just
All right.
remembered.
I
You
heard it
just
somewhere.
remembered. But yes, so depending on your construction schedule, let's say, for instance, you borrow $9 million in May, because I base these on May. Simply in my own mind, because that's when you need the biggest draws is over the summer, right? So there's nothing magical to that. Till we get your construction schedule, that might move. You might need it earlier, depending on when you accept bids. The contractors need bigger deposits and earlier now that compared to when they used to. I hear horror stories about HVAC equipment taking 2 years. So they're asking for deposits earlier to order equipment. Regardless, Crabtree or whomever's involved will give you an estimated draw schedule. And once you have that, we plan out when you're gonna need to borrow it, how quickly are we gonna spend the 9.9 and need the second batch of money? And that also, your business manager was talking about investments. So if she's going to have 5 million of this can be locked up for 6 months, then you can make some money on a CD or what other investment you choose.
How soon does Crabtree usually provide that draw schedule? So that, because that would impact
Yeah, they gave us a loose one, I'll say, right
a
now.
rough one.
Yes.
Rough, yes. And I think when you accept or get closer to the bid
provide it.
process,
Right.
even putting the bids out, they'll have a better idea.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, because that's important as far
We
as
don't need
when
to-
we would borrow the money.
We don't even need to lock them either. I mean, we're gonna give them 4.5%, depending on the rates, with just being liquid, moving it back and forth. So-
Right.
Right, and you're
But
gonna
again,
want to
we'll-
keep some of it liquid because you're going to have bills come in.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Mhm. But some of it can be locked up, and that's one advantage of, borrowing sooner rather than later. You can make a few dollars on the investment, and you're going to earn more than it costs you.
Great. Okay. Anything else?
Next
anyone have?
page.
Butch, if I could just add one quick comment to that.
I keep
Hi,
forgetting
Audrey.
you're on there, sorry.
That's okay. I've been on and off because of traveling. I've been losing signal. Audrey, first of all, thank you so much because you're always so knowledgeable and so you do such a professional job at explaining everything. And I've been right on board with everything you've said. And so just a key point for the board to remember, the reason we want to go to bid so soon following this hearing is because there will be in the construction world, there will be increases coming December 1, January 1 for sure. A lot of them do December 1. So staying on schedule and accepting those bids, you can see as high as a 10% increase in this project. And every dollar that we have to put into this project that we can't save or we can't find interest money to help offset the cost is money that we have to put into the Liberty Curtain project, and we can't apply it to all of the other projects in the 10-year plan. So if we do both bonds, but we end up using some investment money to pay maybe some, the architect fees up front or the demolition on the end, we still have that money. We can apply it to any of those other projects on the 10-year plan. And if I recall, there's $60 million worth of, $64 million worth of projects in the next 10 years. So again, I do think that time is of the essence for approving the bids, mostly really specifically because of the rate increases that we'll continue to see. So that's all.
Construction rates and borrowing rates also are projected to be higher next year, so.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Anyone else have anything? No? Hey, thank you, Audrey. for
Well, I
coming.
just had one last question.
Awesome.
I'm sorry.
That's
Chair.
okay.
Sorry.
I know, we
I
gotta
asked
eat
3
lunch.
times.
Page 7,
Mhm,
financing considerations.
mhm.
What does that mean? Project planning, refined project scope. This is all things that are done, right?
You're in the process. You're getting ready to go out to bid. There's
Okay.
going to be, and I'm not privy to the information, but I'm assuming you have some alternates and some options, things that may be added or cut as you go through the
I
process.
hope so.
Yes, yes.
I
Again,
don't know.
None of my business.
I hope so.
But there will be those things, and the timeline is what we just talked about, the construction timeline and timing the borrowings and your investments so that you have the money when you need it
Mhm.
and it's available. Those are the things that we talked about, savings already on your old ESCO project. And there might be some on the new project as well, whether it's staffing, busing, there may be things that come up. I think at this point, the projection that your side costs such as utilities will be neutral. Expected to be staff and budget neutral on the other
Okay.
things. We had talked some time ago about a reimbursement resolution. This is if you were going to spend money out of district cash that you would want to reimburse yourself from borrowed funds. Based on the numbers that you have to put in 2.6 million of district funds anyway. I don't know that that really applies to you now that we've seen those figures.
Mhm.
And planning, obviously, we talked about Act 1 limitations. I jumped ahead to a lot of these ideas while I was talking. And page 6 was what you were talking about, the 3-year expenditure test. We just skipped right over that. After you borrow the money, you have to reasonably expect to expend it within 3 years. The rule is 85% must be spent within 3 years to avoid
Oh.
financial penalties. That's on page 6. We skipped over that page.
And then that
Um,
shouldn't be any
Wait,
problem.
85%.
It's on page 6. You don't have to write it down.
Well, but I'm sorry, but the second part you said,
Within
But
3 years.
after that, then you get penalized, or at the 85% you start to get penalized?
No, you need to expend 85% within 3 years, or you could owe IRS money. It's called arbitrage.
Okay, so 85 is the cap. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else? Going once, twice?
I'll think about
Go
it.
on.
tonight.
So
I'll
Go
call
on.
you later.
my summary,
I know you
I'll
will.
be with you for the hearing next week.
Sorry. Thank
If
you.
questions come up between now and then, I'll be here presenting a piece of the Act 34 hearing. And as you move ahead with bids, probably should see me again with the full board when you're ready to talk about numbers sooner rather than later. I don't want to wait till
I'm just gonna say, I think.
you
soon-
say we
Yeah.
need money in 6 weeks. I would prefer you not do that. The more time you give me,
So
the better
tomorrow
job
is
I
out of
can
the
do.
question.
Ideally, what time frame do you want from us? Ideally.
Ideally, I'd like to get in front of the board to talk about the process and what it's going to cost. We're going to do a little bit of that at Act 34 hearing, not much detail. And then we'd come back with a resolution for the board to approve a not to exceed borrowing amount. From that point, be about 6 weeks till the money hits your bank account.
Well, I mean, for you,
You're
let's
looking
say, let's say
November, December.
do you want to go in front of the board for your own time frame, help me with everything else you have going on? Do you want to be on the school board work, agenda November, December?
That would, one of those 2 months would probably be good once you have your bids. And we have hard numbers, so to speak. Once you
We'll
accept
have the bids back for board approval in November. So if you could be at November, I would say November work session, would be probably ideal work session and or voted meeting, but we can work out those dates.
Yes.
Just something for the facility committee to figure. We've been talking about those lower numbers on the bond because of lower interest rates. It may be good to find out if we went over that amount, because let's say that you wanted to finance any of the other projects on the 10-year plan and roll it into the same bond. The Liberty Curtain project, we know we could do with the 2 smaller ones, but I'm not sure what the difference is if you wanted to take more money at a higher rate, if there would be advantages or not, or if Audrey even thinks that that is feasible.
Okay,
Well, you can talk amongst yourselves and provide me figures that you would like to see. I can put together any number you want. One thing you might want to consider is a 2023 and a 2024 borrowing, because as we've discussed, the Fed is not done raising rates. I don't know where they're going to be, no crystal ball. You might want to think about that timeline, or even one piece of 20
Sure.
instead of 2, just because I don't know where interest rates are going to be in spring of 2025.
so if we, you would have enough time if we talked and had you in front of us in November, did something in the November voting meeting, you'd have enough time to have a bond issued in
To lock
23?
interest rates. If you approved the resolution in December, if it's early in December, maybe at a
Second week.
reorganization meeting or something.
Second
Yes.
week.
First week.
Yeah, December 5th, I think it is.
The other possibility, if you're so inclined, we could have the resolution prepared and approved the same night that you accept bids, have it later on the agenda. So if for some reason you tabled the bids, we would just table the financing.
That's what I was thinking, we could look at that in November, as soon as we get the hard numbers, press forward in November, that would give you time to get one in 23. And we can turn around and do, like you said, do the same thing in early 24.
Right.
And then if Joni, if we need a special meeting or something, you just let Dr. Martin, with David, whatever. So just to let you know, if something doesn't happen on the work session or the voting session day, I can't speak for the whole board, but we're pretty flexible that if we have to have another meeting to fit her in.
It's
Yeah.
pretty frequent that I'm at the same meeting as construction bids, because let's be honest, if you're accepting construction bids, you want to know you have the money,
Right.
right? You don't want to accept $20
Okay.
million worth of bids and say, oh, well, maybe we should borrow the money.
I
It's
think-
quite often that they happen at the same meeting, and you just put me last later. The financing piece, and
Okay.
one more note on that, the resolution to move ahead with borrowing money does not obligate you to do it. It allows me to do all the paperwork and the state approvals and get everything ready. And then I come back at a later date and, call the ladies in the office here and say, we're ready to lock interest rates. Are you ready to move ahead?
I think, isn't that the way we handled it the last time?
Yes.
If
It
I
gives,
remember
it
right.
gives the best flexibility to have the resolution approved. And let's just say, for instance, we're gonna lock interest rates. The plan is December 5th. I'm making this date up. And December 4th, something crazy happens and interest rates are through the roof. Well, we can just wait. So it gives me I can do the best job when I have the most flexibility.
Right.
And
that make
Audrey, one more question for you then. Even if the board decided to go ahead in November, December to approve one smaller bond, the
Mhm.
9, the 9, I'll call it, under the 10 million, they could still have more time to decide if they wanted to do another just under 10 million at a lower rate, or if they wanted to loop some other projects in. So the board would have more time to decide that second bond, right?
Correct. Yeah, the only rush on that, there wouldn't be a rush on it other than interest rate risk.
And we'd have
Right.
all 24 to do it, so we'd have. yeah.
Depending on the construction schedule, you
correct.
might not need more than 10, it might be 2025 until you needed to borrow money a second time.
Right,
It's just interest rate risk
Right.
is the
yeah. I think the big
rush.
issue on your facility plan, on our 10-year plan, the most immediate there is that HVAC system is failing on a daily basis, and it's a big ticket item. So just something to be aware of.
Okay. All right. If nothing else, again, thank you.
I know you've been trying to get rid of me for 5 minutes.
No.
No, you probably have a long drive, I
Oh.
would assume.
Wait, Rob has a question.
Microphone, please. Microphone, please. Thank you.
If you borrow the money in, say, we borrow the 9.9 now and then another 9.9 on January 31st or sometime in January, because we know the interest rate is low then, can we redo that bond then later in the year if the interest rate goes down? I know a lot of schools are always redoing their bonds because there's better rates. How long do you have to hold that? You know, if we take one now and then one right away in January, if we were trying to split it over 2 years to get the best rate. But say in July, if that rate goes down, can we redo that 9.9
You
again?
mean refinance?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And how long do you, I guess, how long do you have to hold the bond before you can redo it?
because that's.
Yeah, and how much would that cost?
Microphone.
Yeah.
So that is a good question. You can refinance right away. If you refinance right away within the first 5 years, you would have to use taxable rates. After 5 years, we can use tax exempt rates again.
5 years.
Yes, yes, you
Wow.
can do it day one, but then it'll be taxable rates. So the
difference
feasibility
between the
of
two?
that is it does happen. Do I see that happening next year? Probably not. But the point is, if interest rates get so much lower, can you refinance and take advantage of that? Yes.
We're-
But it's gonna cost us more.
That's, I was just wondering, what's the difference between the tax exempt and non-tax exempt rate? If it's like 1%, then the interest rate drops 2%.
Right.
If
It-
the
we'd have-
benefits,
we'd
yeah.
have to weigh the.
Yeah, weigh
Right,
the pros and
it all
cons.
play, now typically the difference between the taxable, let's say even between bank qualified and non-bank qualified, that $10 million threshold, the difference is usually about 15 basis points, 0.15%, but sometimes it's only 5 and sometimes it's 25. It moves, but on average, you're gonna assume from tax exempt to taxable, 0.25% or so, typical. But during COVID, that was one of the strange things that happened. Taxable rates actually went lower than tax exempt for a period. So never say never,
Yeah.
right? I can tell you the normal, and I can tell you that we keep an eye on it, and I have systems in place that if, there's, hey, they can save $300,000. I'm gonna call. She's not gonna want to hear from me, but I'm
When I was on
gonna
the board-
call her and say, you have some work to do.
When I was on the board previously, we did that a couple times.
Yes.
I'm trying to think, it's Carl Beard? Is that the guy that we had?
Carl Beard?
What is that? We had a Beard, I think his name was Beard, he used to do our financial stuff. before.
Carl
Yeah.
is a solicitor.
No, it wasn't
He's
him.
not a bond counsel. In the past, you've used Joe Pierce as your bond counsel. He did retire. And I believe Laura Kurtz, who took over for him, introduced
I was
herself
thinking- yeah, I
to
was thinking
your
the name, but-
administrative team. Joe Pierce has been your bond attorney, and he
No, I
did
can't remember
retire.
who did
Carl
your job
Beard is a
prior-
solicitor.
Who did your job for the district prior to you coming on?
Before me,
Yeah, that guy used, there was an older gentleman who used to come in and talk to us all the time and tell us, you need to do this because the rates
Yeah,
have dropped
less.
considerably.
less
Yes.
fair.
Last bear.
Yeah, yeah, that's my father-in-law. We worked
Okay.
That was
together.
real wild. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah, we worked together
close,
for a long time. He's
Carl.
retired now. I've sent him off.
Kicked him off.
You've done a
Okay.
terrific
I
job.
sent him
We
out to
appreciate
greener
it.
pastures.
But he would come back to us quite often and say the rates are dropping.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Look at this chart.
Yeah.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
2012, if you look at the
Yeah.
interest rate chart on page 4, in 2012, when we hit this right here, the lowest all-time ever, we thought it was nuts.
Never gonna go
Yeah.
lower.
Nuts. And then in 2017, it went lower, and then COVID's a whole nother story. But I remember in 2012, and I think you guys were one of the ones in that little drop there in 2012, that I was like, we got to do this. So that was us, and that's when that started happening.
Yeah, I can remember
That's
doing
great.
it a couple times, so.
Well, it's
okay.
been a pleasure. You did a super terrific
you.
job.
Thank you. I wanted to answer through the microphone. That's why I sat back down. I
Thank
know
you.
I'm dismissed.
Let's see, we did Liberty Curtain. Options, we did the business privilege, real estate collection updates.
Yes, I just wanted to give you just for your information. As of, I believe it was last week, we actually collected 82% of the real estate taxes for the year. That was all within the discount period. So, the mass of the collections comes in, but it was about 82% for 21 million.
Is that normal,
It is,
abnormal?
it is. We're right on track, actually. And the majority of that is sitting in that 4.5% interest bearing account.
Good
So-
job, Joni.
So just let you know, I just want to give you an
Thank you. No, we
FYI.
appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, the audit update, pre-audit meeting. I sat down the other day with Joni and Adam Purcell from Baker Tilly. And he discussed, basically, we look at that link. There's a handout that we're gonna have for our meeting in October. And it basically tells how the audit is. We've all been through audits before. We know how they work. We know the process. It's pretty simple.
I'm only gonna have really one question. I'm sorry I interrupted. Basically, is anything major different than last year? And then if you could, if there's any major difference,
I asked them that because I know we had an issue last year with the transition. There was a finding and they're not anticipating everything. They've been working smooth.
Great.
Everything's been going well. So he actually has a schedule. Let me scroll down to it. Basically, we're looking at November and December should have the audit completed. So they'll have a presentation to us after that. So
They're in here every Thursday for like the next 4 weeks. So their whole team comes in on Thursday. They park themselves over here in the break room, which is nice, honestly, because then if they need anything, we're right here. It's kind of hands-on.
mhm.
The AFR though is due in October 31st. So-
Acronym.
Oh, annual financial
Financial
report.
report.
Thank you.
Geez, I even knew that one.
Is due on October 31st. So the
Okay.
bulk of the audit will be done by then because that's a PDE. You can get an extension, but that's a PDE upload, just like the budget. So they anticipate that the bulk of the audit to be done. The actual numbers will be done, but then after that, they still ask for additional
Sure.
tests and
They'll be
everything. So-
refining it and getting it ready to present to us.
Mhm.
Right.
So,
Yes, but this will be handed out. It's uploaded here, but it's just a
Mhm.
document that will be handed out at the board meeting for all of you to have. It's a requirement also to meet with either, the finance chair, just to go over any questions he may have, risk, fraud, any of those
Mhm.
types of, questions that he might be aware of. So just, part of the due diligence.
No, super terrific.
Okay, and again, if anyone has any questions on that, hopefully they'll look it over between now and the October meeting and ask any questions of us prior to the meeting, so we're not blindsided. So, okay, last, the CTC tractor
RFP,
Yep.
request for
for
proposal.
proposal.
Okay, so the reason why I stuck it on here is I was hoping to get your approval. The bids will not be back until October 9th. That is past the work session.
Well,
This is a tractor that CTC wants to bid, and it's used Perkins dollars. So my question to the board is, can we put a placeholder on the work session for the RFP?
yeah, like,
We just-
We won't have the
we don't
actual
have a
bids
number.
back until the voting meeting.
well, you guys are gonna have an idea of what the range is gonna be, right? I mean,
I don't.
oh,
You're looking for someone to send a bid of what it's gonna cost. And we won't know, we
And
know
it's-
when to buy it, it's coming from Perkins
But it's
funding.
being paid with Perkins
It
money,
is,
so
it's a Perkins
it's
grant.
not,
Grant, yeah.
I just wanted to
speak-
know that
So-
the bids for October 5th, we can say this exact thing. This is Perkins grant. It's an RFP for the CTC to buy a tractor.
And it's
It
gonna
would
be
be
very
nice-
similar we do with personnel. We put the position on, we're
Yeah.
gonna hire somebody, we leave the
They
name blank.
Anticipated.
So it's gonna be anticipated, so it will be good for
Yes.
the October.
But I would hate to have
13th.
it be held up for
Well-
till November.
I would
Um,
really appreciate it if, just to get, so the public knows too, and the rest of the board, that the importance of this piece.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Well,
And it is, they're super excited about it. So
Well,
I'm
who
glad
doesn't
for
like a
'em,
tractor?
and I don't want to hold them up.
I
Well,
wouldn't mind.
I think probably Kurt could address that
He'll
at
be
the
here.
work
He'll be
session.
here
He'll
on
be
Yeah, that would
there.
probably
at the
be a good
work
idea to
session.
have
And he
him.
can give us,
Absolutely.
he can give us the details and you can explain why it's on there the way it is. And
Absolutely.
We can talk about the
Absolutely.
need and what they're
And by
gonna
the
put.
voting session, we'll upload immediately. October 9th, the bids will come in. We will upload immediately
Sure.
and make sure it's posted.
Super
Gets-
terrific.
If it's a good deal, maybe I'll talk in and buy me one. Christmas is coming. Anyone have anything else? Thank you. We'll
Good.
see everybody at 5:45, I guess, in their next meeting. We have a couple minute break.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. You guys were wonderful.
Before that.
Appreciate it.